TJ Wilson, aka Tyson Kidd, and you're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast.
You're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast, established 2019, direct from the North Wales coast. His verbal skills definitely outweigh his wrestling ability. It's time for British wrestling's sharpshooter, your host, Stu Palmer.
Well, a warm welcome. We are back on Stu's Wrestling Podcast for episode 202, and I have got an author, and my guest is Lee Herbert, who wrote the book Rampage, the World Wrestling Federation's invasion of the British Isles between 1989 and 1993. Lee, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate you having me here, and for that very enthusiastic introduction. I like the energy. I need to up my game now, I feel.
You'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine. Now, the book, mate, what a time for us as fans, that period when WWF first came over in 1989 to London, of course, and just the origins of that, and you penning the book and putting the book together initially.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. It was a magical time, really, and it's not a time that we'll ever experience again, to be honest, just because the things that made it so special could never happen now. And yesterday I was posting I've started sharing all my research online now, all the bits and bobs that I've collected from newspapers, and it's quite incredible when you see it, really. And newspapers back in 1992 were a huge deal, and today not many people go to the shop and buy a newspaper or have one delivered. But the Daily Mirror, it'd have a readership of like 9.6 million people or something like that, and on the front cover of the newspaper you'll see Bret Hart with a message saying, inside collect free trading cards, or you got your free wall chart or whatever it was. And it was such a big deal. And then come away from newspapers, you walk into any shop on the high street. If you go in WH Smith, they've got the videos from Silvervision. You walk in Woolworths, they've got all the toys from Hasbro. You go in some dodgier shops, and they might have knockoff merch and bits and bobs. You go to, what was it, Clinton's Cards, whatever it was, and they've got pin badges and calendars. It was just absolutely everywhere in our lives. And even today, the WWE as it is, they make more money than ever. They're doing all this stuff globally, but they are not in people's lives in anywhere near the same way they were in 91, 92, when it was just this cultural phenomenon. Which is another strange aspect to that is that in the US, obviously things were kind of worse than ever, and interest was at its lowest levels it had been since the national expansion, Hulkamania. So things had dipped massively there. House shows getting cancelled, cost cutting, and yet here it was like the biggest thing. The biggest craze that we'd had, because all the other bits, crazes had come and gone. He-Man, Turtles, New Kids on the Block, Kylie Minogue, whatever it was, but nothing had that staying power and had the interest, really, in WWF. So it was a magical time, absolutely.
So good, so good. I remember having a wall chart up in my bedroom, right? Yeah. And I think you had to cut the photos out. It wasn't like stick on or anything like that. Yeah. And I think it would have been leading up to SummerSlam 92, because I was there. I was in attendance. Lee, amazing. I have said this for nearly 200 episodes. I was there. I was at Wembley Stadium. People are like, not again. He's not going to talk about that, is he? But I had the wall chart, you're saying about what you'd got through the papers and stuff like that. And it was on my wall for years. Remember to cut everything out, get the Pritt stick out, and then put each, said wrestler on their spot. It was just amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the things, what you've just described there. Now imagine speaking to, a 10-year-old kid today and saying, you've got to make your own poster with inky newspaper, and you're going to get ink all over you, and you need to cut it all out, and you need to Pritt stick it on yourself. Imagine explaining that concept to someone now. But at the time, that was amazing. And because you'd kind of made that poster yourself, you had a bit more of an attachment to it as well, because it's like, okay, well, they gave you all the bits, but you actually made that wrestling poster at the end of it. So it was amazing. But yeah, it's funny to look back and think we were just cutting out pictures out of the newspaper and sticking them together, and it was this big thing. But yeah, they did 3 of those actually. So they'd done one just before the Rampage tour that year. So in April they did World Chart, they did the SummerSlam World Chart, but then they did one for WrestleMania 9 as well. So yeah, it was a big thing, the World Charts. People in America now are probably thinking, what on earth are they like? What are they talking about? But yeah, it was a big thing over here.
Amazing. Now, with the book, of course, Barry Darsow wrote the foreword. Amazing. Got to meet Barry over in the States at WrestleMania Week many years ago with Bill Eadie, of course. But just having him writing the foreword and speaking to him about that time as well, because he was around with Demolition, of course, especially in that early period when he came here. Just being in contact with Barry Darsow, and using him for the book. How amazing.
Yeah, it's a kind of a bit of a pinch yourself moment, really, because I'm sat here now and I've got a Repo Man Hasbro on my office shelf, and I had his trading card growing up. I remember in the back of WWF magazine in one of the issues there was a big picture of him, in the next to a car somewhere and all this stuff. So yeah, when you get to speak to someone like that, it's quite surreal. But what I will say about Barry is, which is amazing, you hear all these stories about how wrestling was this cutthroat business and everyone was trying to protect their spot, and everyone was stabbing each other in the back trying to get the best positions. And then you meet Barry, who was on top in the Hulkamania era. He was in the #1 tag team in one of the biggest boom periods the business has ever had. So you'd think, oh, he must be like this ruthless, kind of cutthroat guy. And he's just the nicest guy you could meet, like such a sweetheart. And you think, so maybe it's not, wrestling isn't always like that, because if you've got someone like him who's in a top position and he's this really sweet, nice guy, I think maybe some things get exaggerated a little bit sometimes, because he's amazing. But I mean, he really remembers coming over here because I think it was the Manchester on one of the Manchester shows on one of the Rampage tours that stood out, because what Barry said was, in the States they would do sometimes a double shot. They would do two shows in the same day. But he said what was different about over here was he did in Manchester. He worked 2 shows in the same building on the same day, and they both sold out. So that was really strange and something he'd never experienced before, because in the States, when you did a double shot, they'd be in 2 completely different places. So you'd do, a midday show in one place, and then you'd have a 4-hour drive and you'd do your other show in the evening. But here, he was just working the same building twice in one day with 2 different crowds sold out. And he said that's what he remembered about the UK, just that the interest was so strong. They were able to do that, and he just never seen it done before like that.
Harvey Goldsmith, obviously very pivotal to SummerSlam 92 and getting that going. Was he involved in the earlier tours?
Yeah.
Was he around at that? I wanted to pick your brain about that, because I wasn't 100% when he came in and when he was part of it.
Yeah, Harvey was very early, because he actually had a lot of contacts within Sky and people in television. So yeah, quite early on he got involved with Vince McMahon. I spoke to Harvey, and there was also another guy that co-promoted with Harvey that doesn't really get talked about, but you'll see his name in the programs, a guy called Tim Parsons. But it turns out that they separately had spoken to the WWF about doing stuff over here. But the reason the WWF went with Harvey was because of his TV connections, which they felt was going to be really important. And then as we, with the first live event in '89, that was a live Sky broadcast. So that was very much part of the plan. It was Vince always wanted the TV exposure, and Harvey had the contacts. But it turned out that Tim, who he was more rock bands, the Clash, the Jam, stuff like that. That was more what he'd done before. But Dick Glover, who was kind of Vince's number 2 at the time, he'd gotten really well with Tim and thought he could add a lot with the touring side as well. So they asked him to co-promote. So Harvey he just had the London shows to himself, basically. And then everything outside, Tim was also a co-promoter. But yeah, right from the beginning, they were involved with all that.
Yeah, I thought I'd ask. I didn't know stuff, obviously, that you've brought to the fore, of course, through doing this, and everyone you've contacted and spoke to. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Absolutely. What was your first WWF, WWE show in attendance? That's what I was going to ask you. And come away for the book for a second.
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that, and I think this is possibly subconsciously one of the reasons why I did the book, in that I never got to go as a kid. We lived, we were speaking off air before, so I lived in a village that was kind of on the North Wales border, so not really much going on. They did do a Telford show after a few years, but I didn't even get to go to that. But yeah, the idea of my parents taking me to Manchester or London, I mean, to be honest, just driving on those roads probably would have terrified them. It was never going to happen. So in August 92, I was actually watching Big Daddy in Barmouth, well, a place called Talabonchas near Barmouth, where we used to go every summer. But that was kind of the extent of my live wrestling experience. It was Big Daddy. So I do wonder if subconsciously this is me kind of wanting to go and relive the stuff that I never got to have. Well, not relive it, just live it for the first time, because I missed out. So yeah, and it was definitely one of the reasons why I started the book, is that I just didn't, a lot of the stuff I missed. So the Rampage tours and things like that, I didn't really know a lot about on those first live events in '89. So this was as much me learning about it myself as it was writing it for other people. I wanted to kind of know all the stuff that happened on this tours and all these places that they went, because I was just stuck watching Big Daddy in a marquee with about 200 people while you were at SummerSlam.
I'm sorry, Lee. I'm sorry now that I've spoke about it and said about it till the cows come home on this show about being attended at Wembley Stadium.
Honestly, I'm really not bitter about it. But yeah, so yeah, I was very late. I didn't get to a show till years later in the 2000s.
Where were you for that one, if you can remember?
Yeah, so I've seen a few in Manchester. It gets a bit hazy, to be honest. All the years, kind of modern era years, and I know 2000s isn't that modern now, but they all start blending together a bit for me. Whereas like 1991, 92, I can really separate them in my mind. But you show me a match from 2006 and a match from 2015, I can't tell you which is which, really. It's just things like, it all blends together. So really, I can't remember, if I'm being brutally honest, but it was late. I know I definitely got to see the Wyatt family, but that's many years later. So there must have been one before that, but yeah.
Yeah, I did a few house shows in 03 and 04.
Right.
And do you know what? Sometimes, because they could go off kilter a little bit with what was going on with the storylines. Like, I remember Kurt Angle teasing Undertaker, after the matches. If you wouldn't have seen it on television, would you? So it was just mad to see that. Getting to see like Chris Benoit in the mid-card of that event at Manchester against A-Train, against Albert,
right?
And it was quite possibly the match of the day. It was like an afternoon show. It was in Manchester at the MEN. That was the best match. Yeah. Honest to God. Great
stuff. Yeah. No, it's there is something quite fun about the house shows. Like I say, I've definitely been to a TV recording, and I've been to some house shows. But like I say, which is which, I can't remember. But I did really enjoy the house show. I do remember enjoyed it, and it feels like the wrestlers got a bit more freedom because they're not going on TV, so they can do other bits and bobs. But yeah, which I think is kind of what's disappointing about the way prices have gone as well, because I'd go to all the house shows when they were in and around Manchester, but when the prices start now to become more expensive than they are for a TV recording, you think, it just makes it a little bit. It's just unaffordable, really. To drop a couple £100 for me, and then the same for my daughter for a house show is just crazy.
One night at WrestleMania next year, Lee, it's like $700 for a base ticket. The most I ever paid was in Dallas in 2016, $200, and it was a good seat. It was just behind ringside.
You wouldn't get anything for $200.
No, they're outpricing families, Lee. Yeah. It's ridiculous. But I knew when TKO acquired it, UFC's ticket prices have been extortionate for years, so I knew the writing was on the wall that they were going to go even further. But that was what WWE was for us. Yeah. It was a family occasion, wasn't it? The family could go. It's ridiculous now. It's a premium price, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and if you go back to, say, this era, when the WWF was a huge part of the culture here in the early 90s, you know, we had things that were accessible. You know, in the book, I spoke to a guy called Richard Wallace, who, I don't know if you remember the Sporting Superstars poster magazines. They were official poster magazines, but they were a UK thing. And, you know, when I was talking to him about it, he said, you know, we were offering people a really accessible way into buying something WWF, officially WWF. You know, it was like £1.25 or something for your poster magazine. You could get a couple of packets of stickers for 20p each. You know, we had all these really accessible things for kids. And I think they're kind of just losing a bit of that at the minute. And if they're not careful, they're going to lose that generation. And, you know, I'm 41 now, unfortunately, and I'm still talking about 1991, 1992. You know, a kid's 40 years from now going to be talking about today. The way it's going, I don't think they will be, because they're losing that connection with kids, with things like the sticker albums and the poster mags and all these bits and bobs, you know, when it's all just about expensive tickets. And, you know, people like me, I mean, I could probably afford to go to a show, but, you know, I'd be stretching my budget doing it. And when you start doing that, and then it means, oh, well, I probably won't take my daughter then, because actually we're not going to be able to afford to go on holiday next month. When it gets like that, you know, you're going to start to lose those people. So, yeah, I think it'll change, though. The interest will start to cool off, and then it'll go back around. So
they're making enough money out of TV deals, you know, ESPN,
yeah.
got Netflix globally, haven't they? I just don't, why hit the fans in a live aspect, in a live area, in a live forum to go and watch it? The mind boggles with it. It's corporate bigwigs, isn't it? Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I was going to ask you as well, from beginning the book to finishing it, how long did it take you? How long did the project take you end to end? I wanted to ask you about that.
It's a good question. It's quite a hard one to answer, because there are a few gaps in there. I think I started writing it in, it was in the January, really, probably about a year. It took longer for its release because there were some gaps in there, and I sent it away to a guy to do some editing work. Then I was waiting for some artwork and things like that. So to release, it was probably about 20 months from when I first started writing the first bits, but it was probably about a year writing it, really, if I think about it properly.
I love that. I just love the visual there.
Yeah.
So cool. It's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Well,
I love it.
The guy that did that, he actually used to do work for WWE. So he's an artist called, I'll give him his credit, his name's Ben Talon. So he's from the UK, and years ago he ended up working on when WWE still had their magazines. He did work on the official magazine, and then when that finally went, they did continue with the kids magazine for a while. I don't know if you remember. So Ben used to do a lot of work. I think he worked on about 40 projects for them altogether, but the posters that you had in the kids magazine, quite often he'd done the illustrations or the design or whatever. But I've shared stuff on social media he did before, but he did loads of cool stuff. He did a thing with, he created a load of banners for a project, had people like Cody and Paul Heyman in, and people like that. Obviously this was Cody in his previous stint, because this is going back a few years, but he'd done loads of amazing stuff. He was a fan growing up over here as well, so he was a big, you know, early 90s kid. So I asked him if he would be up for doing the illustration. He's done he's done the cover, and there's total of 22 illustrations inside, I think. So he's done all those as well. So yeah, I've got a legit WWE artist that's done it all as well. So just adds that extra layer of a bit of authenticity to it. But yeah, I love that image, because that was us, wasn't it, as a kid? You know, we were all trying to do a sharpshooter on people and all that kind of stuff, tying shoelaces around your arms and all that. So I think that just really captures what the story's about.
A lot of visuals and video have come up from the 1989 show down in London. Of course, Tony Schiavone and Lord Alfred Hayes were on commentary. I hadn't seen it for years and years. Yeah. I came in watching wrestling from 90. Didn't have Sky at home. Watched it at my cousin's. That's where I got my fix. We didn't have Sky for years. I badgered my dad for donkey's years later to get it.
We were all in the same boat, don't we?
So that show and seeing the stuff now, you know, Hogan and Savage were on that bill, weren't they? Of course, and just the grandeur of that, and just doing your research for that show within the book.
Yeah, you're right. It was quite hard to find for a long time because I think it was to do with the name, because it was called Superstars of Wrestling, the same as the Sky One show. Because of course, on the network, we never got the Superstar shows that were branded as Superstars of Wrestling. It was something to do with that name, wasn't it? And someone had the copyright to it or something. But that's kind of the reason why on the network it was only when it just became Superstars in 91. We had those episodes, didn't we, from then on. So it never made it onto the network. So I'm assuming it's all part of that same thing with the Superstars weekly shows. But they see, I'm hopeful now it's going to go on the Vault, because the Vault have started now uploading those old ones. So they've obviously sorted something out, or they just don't care anymore, or I don't know what. For whatever reason, they've started uploading now Superstars of Wrestling shows. So I'm hoping that 89 one will be part of it. But yeah, it was quite hard to track down for a long time, that one. And the card, to be honest, was pretty shocking, apart from the main event, because you got Hogan Savage. There's some weird shows like Paul Roma versus the Brooklyn Brawler was second to last match of the night. You think, what is going on? You had Brett losing as well. And Brett was just starting to really get over, and then you've got him losing to Dino Bravo. It's just really weird card. But yeah, it was the start of something really, really big. And the morning after that, Hogan was on Good Morning Britain with Lorraine Kelly and all that kind of stuff. So I'll talk about that in the book, because I mean, you're a football fan. I'm assuming you know who Richard Keys is.
Of course, yes, yeah. Of course I do.
Well, Richard Keys was on the couch with Hulk Hogan, trying to antagonize him quite a bit, to be honest. So I've written a bit about that in the book, because obviously he had to get in his digs in about wrestling being fake and all, you know. And to be honest, Hogan handles it pretty well, I thought, because he just kind of keeps his cool. But part of me was just wanting him to grab Richard Keys in a headlock, to be honest. But and Lorraine Kelly was just flirting with him basically throughout the whole thing. So that was quite funny. And then they actually did a show that night in Birmingham as well, which isn't on Cage Match. So that's kind of a forgotten UK show that they did. So they mixed up the card. So the main event for that one, it was a tag team match. I think it was Hogan and Duggan against Savage, and so I'd need to look that up again now. It's gone. I shouldn't have brought it up. But yeah, so they had a tag main event for that one. But yeah, that was added on due to high demand. Classic sold out in Birmingham the next night. So yeah, it was. And then that was it then till 91.
Yeah. Definitely. I wanted to ask you as well, was there anything that came up, you're saying about that show from Birmingham that's not listed on Cage Match, of course.
Yeah.
Was there anything you learned doing the book that you didn't know prior, that you're like, wow, this happened? I'm sure there was lots of that, but maybe one or two things that came up that you didn't know, you weren't aware of before penning the book.
Yeah, loads of stuff. I mean, even just going back to that show, because Duggan appears as King Duggan in that show, but he'd actually already lost the crown in America. But because we were on a time lapse with our Superstar shows, we hadn't seen Duggan lose his crown yet. So when they came over to do the live show, they somehow, someone must have said, "Oh, he's still the king in the UK, so he needs to keep the gimmick." So that was quite clever, really, that they didn't sort of disrupt the flow when they're on that time lapse. But I mean, there was absolutely loads of stuff. I mean, especially talking to the promoters. I spoke to Tom Emanuel, who was editor-in-chief of WWF magazine for a decade. So that whole story of how he got the magazine on shelves over here, all that was new to me. And it's probably one of my favorite bits of the book, to be honest, because he was a guy from the UK that moved to New York in about 80, 81, stumbled into a job working for the McMahons and ended up running the publishing for them. And then he came over here and negotiated with a distributor, got the magazine on the shelves over here, and it's just an amazing story. That one, really liked it. Similar thing. I spoke to Ian Allen, who was the founder of Silver Vision Video. So that whole story, I've heard variations of it before, but Ian hasn't really done a lot. So it's kind of more been employees of his that have been interviewed previously. So there's quite a few things there that I didn't know about because it was kind of coming straight from the original guy. So yeah, that was amazing, and I still keep in touch with Ian. He's a really nice guy. So yeah, to be honest, loads of stuff. 90% of the book I didn't know before.
we could do a couple of hours on it. We really could. Definitely. Again, getting hold of these people, just amazing. There, how was that? Getting the contact? Was it easy? Was it tough getting hold of the people from yesteryear that were so heavily involved in it?
Yeah, it was tough. Yeah, with some people because we're talking about some guys here that are kind of in their 70s now, maybe even in their 80s, one or two, and they're not heavy social media users. They're quite off the grid. Some of these guys quite old school. So I was writing actual letters to people, because email addresses you couldn't find, and so yeah, it's quite difficult. And but pretty much everyone was up for it. Really, there's only one that stands out. I didn't get a reply from. But I think I kind of know the reason why, and it's nothing to do with me, more something to do with Vince McMahon, I think. But we won't go into that. Yeah, most people were really receptive, and what was really interesting was speaking to these people because, like the guys up Merlin, the WWF was just a small part of their lives because they went on to get the Premier League license on the back of the success of it. And it was the Premier League license that got them all the publicity and the awards and things like that. So when you speak to these people, you think, well, are they actually going to remember much about doing the wrestling stuff? Or is that just going to be oh, yeah, we did wrestling for a couple of years? But when you speak to these people, they all spoke about it so warmly and with such great memories. The Merlin guys were telling me about when The Undertaker did an appearance at their warehouse of all places, and about 10,000 people showed up. So they all had these wonderful memories. So it was quite what the word is for it, but yeah, it was just really nice, really, just to hear that to them, even though it was just it was their business doing WWF branded stuff, but they still, even if they hadn't been a fan before, they ended up having this connection to it because it was just such a magical time. And if 10,000 people turn up at your warehouse in a Milton Keynes trading estate, you're never going to forget that day, are you? And they'd done all the place out like a funeral parlor. They had it properly kitted out. Like they remember the Undertaker said that, I can't believe like what a good job you've done of this. It was all legit funeral stuff in this way. So that you're never going to forget that, are you? But yeah, it was nice to hear these people, and it changed their lives. So it's understandable.
The documentary on Merlin several years ago on ITV was superb. Just to go back onto that about the boom of the Premier League, of course, as you alluded to earlier there. What a documentary that was, Lee. I enjoyed it. It was superb.
That's it. Well, I spoke to two of the guys that were in that I spoke to, but yeah, in that documentary, there's a tiny bit about wrestling, isn't there?
Yeah.
And it is very football focused. And it's actually, the documentary came from a book, so I've read the book as well. Same kind of thing. There's a bit in there about wrestling, but most normal people are just interested in the football. It's only us geeks that are into the wrestling. So I contacted Mark Hillier and Peter Warser, and I just said, I've seen the documentary, I've read the book, but I just want to go back to the WWF stuff because that's the bit I'm really interested in. And that's just an amazing story because as they explained in the documentary, Robert Maxwell was trying to just do everything he could to ruin the company, basically, because they had come away from Panini, started up on their own, and he was just getting all these crazy legal things sent their way just to tie them up financially in court and just ruin them, basically. So the WWF was their last throw of the dice, because if it hadn't worked, they'd have probably lost their homes, they'd lost their cars. It was the end financially for all of them. So they bought this WWF license, Peter Warsop told me he didn't even know if they had enough money to launch the sticker collection, because obviously you can't, you have to spend money before you can start bringing it in with a sticker collection, because you've got to have 1 million stickers printed and you've got to have all this other stuff. Then you've got to advertise it. So he didn't even know if they could get it on the shelves. So they'd stopped taking any pay. So all the founders stopped taking a wage. He was the only person with the checkbook left. It was just last throw of the dice. They went for it. Macho Man did a TV advert. So WWF really supported it. And it was just a massive success. And, within months, rather than getting asked, why are you doing wrestling? A few months later, people were asking them, when are you doing the next one? Because it was just such a massive success, millions of packets of stickers being sold. And so then they pivoted to the trading cards, and everyone asked them again, what are you doing? People don't buy trading cards in the UK. And then didn't quite prove them wrong with the first one, even though it was successful. But when they started doing the Gold Series SummerSlam ones, that was the first of its kind really in the UK, that the success of that trading card collection. And they were pricing them close to the stickers as well, which had never been done before. Trading cards was always this much more expensive thing. So they really changed the game, Merlin. And great times. And people are still buying old vintage sticker albums now, which just goes to show what an impact they had.
Before we go, who was your favourite wrestler as a youngster? Who was the one? Who was the man? Who was Lee Herbert's favourite?
So it's kind of a two-part answer to that one. So I think the one that really, the one that caught my attention really was the Ultimate Warrior. I think it was just the look, basically. That was it. I hadn't seen him wrestle, probably for the best. So I think that's the one that kind of made me think, oh, what's this? It looks like a superhero. But 100% favourite, all time, best there is, the best there was, best there ever will be, Bret the Hitman Hart. And I got to meet him this year, and I got 3 autographs. So that was amazing. There aren't many people that I would think I need to grab this opportunity and just go and get a couple of things signed and say hello. But that was one of very few that I'd feel that way about. So yeah, I was very pleased I got to see him this year.
Yes, yeah. I'm so happy with that answer. Again, I've said it time and time again on this show. I've got to meet him. I've got to meet him in 2013 over in New Jersey at WrestleMania week as well. But yeah, just couldn't string a sentence together, Lee. I struggled.
I lost the ability to speak, but I gave him a copy of the book, and I wrote a note in the front page, which I'm really glad I did, because like I said, I didn't really know what to say when I stood in front of him, but I kind of said it in my note, so hopefully he read that. And but yeah, just amazing. And I talk about him. He gets quite a few plugs in the book, as you'd expect. But I think that what was special about Bret was, when you were a kid, you loved him because, he looked like this rock star, he just looked really cool. Had the leather jacket, the long wet hair. It just looked like he'd come off, stage, playing for AC/DC or something, so he was just a really, really cool wrestler. Obviously the shades, everything, the whole package. But then as you got older and you watched his stuff back as an adult, you appreciated him for just how good he was in the ring and how good he made everyone else look, and just the pride he took in his work, all that stuff. So he is someone that, no matter your age, you can find something in him. And there's not a huge amount of wrestlers like that, because usually it might be someone you like as a kid, and you grow up, you think, oh, that was a bit silly. Or the opposite way around. As a kid, you don't like, and when you grow up, you think, like Roddy Piper. Now I think, oh my God, how good was Roddy Piper? He is now one of my favourites. Didn't like him when I was a kid at all. And when I see him back now, I think he was amazing. So, but Bret, yeah, from the day I saw him till the day I die, Bret will be number one.
All I said was, I was at SummerSlam 92, of course. I was going to say that. I was with my dad as well. My dad was there for it. And I couldn't muster up anything. You like the outdoor shows, do you? He says. I said, yeah, I do. That was the sum total of it. I've been fine with everybody else.
Yeah.
I've met so many copious amounts of wrestlers over the years, you know. I just struggled. It was like my mates when they met Sean. I didn't get to meet Sean when they were there, but they'd got the Access VIP package, I think. They had the same trouble because they idolized Sean so much.
Yeah.
It just happens, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, I can identify with that. It was tough. And I realized as well, I thought, God, I haven't said anything. It's been like 30 seconds. He was just like signing a bit. So I was like, shall I say? And then you start thinking, well, shall I say something? And it's just, but then you just having conversations with yourself, and trying not to make a fool of yourself. So it is hard, but he's got that aura, hasn't he? He's just got that, and but I'm glad I got to meet him.
Lee, before we go, of course, a quick plug for the book, where the viewers and listeners can purchase the book, Rampage, the World Wrestling Federation's invasion of the British Isles from the period of 1989 to 1993. Of course, quick plug from you, please.
I need to get my plugs in. So it's available paperback and ebook. So at the moment, if you want the paperback, it's only available through the Great British Bookshop. I can't remember the web address, but it's Great British Bookshop, I assume. But it's on all the social medias. If you're one of these people that reads their books on a tablet, it's definitely not me, but I'm not judging. That's just on Amazon. If you read it and if you enjoy it, please leave a review as well, because that helps. If you don't enjoy it, you don't need to leave a review, but just give it to someone else, or give it, leave it in the doctor's surgery or whatever. Available online. Check out my social media and stuff, and you'll be able to find it.
I became aware of the book through TikTok, through the clips you've put up and stuff
like
that. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Places, it was coming up. It was coming up loads on my feed. Obviously you were putting old clips up, weren't you? Stuff like that, of course.
Yeah, I tried it. Yeah, I wasn't sure, because like TikTok, I'm not really the TikTok generation, am I? But I gave that a whirl. I thought I'll start sticking a few bits up, but I haven't really given it too much consideration. So I'm glad, though, now I know that at least one person has. So something to think about. No, it's always post across the board. You never know, Lee. Yeah.
I use TikTok. I know, like you say, it's for the younger ones, but I use TikTok for both my shows. I really do, because you don't know who's watching. You really don't.
No, because I kind of thought, I might just leave that one, because I wasn't sure if it was actually worth sticking things on there. But no, there you go then. So I've learned something today.
As have I with the history of the business during that period over the UK boom at that time, of course. Lee Herbert has been my guest for episode 202 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast. We are on the Sports Social Podcast Network. I think it's 700 shows and counting now. Europe's biggest sports podcast network. If you've got a show and you want to join them, they basically stop your listing fees for audio. They pay for that. You put ads in your episodes and the cost is covered. So I can't recommend them enough. All the big podcasts are on there, Under the Kosh podcast being one of them. They're on their big football show. So thank you to them. And back to my guest, just a thank you, Lee Herbert, the author of Rampage, obviously the period of WWF when it came to the British Isles in 1989 to 1993. I still need to get the book, Lee. I will get it. I will let you know
put it on your list for Santa.
I can't wait to read it.
Put it on your list for Santa Claus.
I will.
But no, thank you so much for inviting me on. I really do appreciate it. And hope some of your listeners check it out.
Thank you very much, mate.
Thank you for having me.
Wrestling writer and historian Brian R. Solomon, and you are listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast. I was the 100th guest on this podcast, so I think it's definitely worth your time.
You're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast, established 2019, direct from the North Wales coast. His verbal skills definitely outweigh his wrestling ability. It's time for British wrestling's sharpshooter, your host, Stu Palmer.